Hello, everyone. You're listening to CloudNext, your go-to source for cloud innovation and leaders' insight, brought to you by Global Dots.
If you are a DevOps engineer at a small startup or a big company, headaches like setting up Kubernetes, managing complexity, and ensuring security are a daily struggle. Our guest today has been there and done that. He started at eBay, worked at smaller startups like Forta and Rookout, and co-founded Komodor. Itiel Schwartz is now CTO of Komodor, and he'll share with us his insights on navigating Kubernetes challenges and common pitfalls to avoid. We'll also deep dive into his experiences, industry changes, the intersection of Kubernetes and AI, and some top advice for those on their journey. Itiel, before we start, what should we know about you?
Hey, first of all, that I'm super happy to be here. It's a great podcast experience so far. We have a great recording studio here in we work in Israel. What do you need to know about me? I'm 34 years old. I have two amazing daughters and a loving wife. And I've been doing computer science ever since my degree. Basically, I studied computer science and psychology, something like 15 years ago, something like that. And ever since then, I'm in love with the tech community and world, basically.
Wow. You don't often hear people saying they're studying computers with psychology side by side. That's quite interesting.
It's a good combo. I recommend to people who want something a bit different than only computer science to take it, even it was a bit challenging as there's a lot of overlapping between the two courses.
I would suspect almost zero. I'm guessing there was only one person that was overlapping those two courses as well, and that would have been you.
No, to be honest, there is in Israel, in Tel Aviv University, it is they are trying to make people more interdisciplinary. So they are trying to make it something almost common. So there are 5 or 6 people every year taking this.
That is genuinely awesome. Israel seems to be ahead on this part of the world and education and other stuff. I don't want to fall down a rabbit hole talking about that. And I've talked about it previously, but the number of women in IT in Israel is unbelievable and something for us all to replicate. But back to you. You started your journey at very large enterprises like eBay and then smaller startups, of one of which you're a co-founder now, Komodor. Mm-hmm. How does the adoption and implementation of Kubernetes differ between these enterprises? And Kubernetes is the flavor of this podcast, just in case anyone didn't guess.
Yeah. So I'll be honest, when I started at eBay, it was almost 13 years ago. I was the first intern at eBay Israel. So there was no Kubernetes. So back then, it's more classical VMs using some Java Tomcat server that is running everything. So back then, no Kubernetes at all. When I joined Forta, which was back then a very small Israeli startup doing fraud detection, we also weren't in Docker. It was using a HashiCorp Packer and EC2 machines. During my time there, Docker has become more and more popular, and Kubernetes also became more and more popular. So I had the luck and I will say quite ordeal to do a migration of EC2 machines from custom scripts to Docker. And this was something a 1-year project for the company. Even we were quite a small company. And it just showed how even with a lot of really talented, strong people, migration to containers is something which looks trivial maybe from the side, but is super hard. And after a couple of years there, where I really enjoyed, I learned, and Forta is now a huge company. I think there are 600, 700 people. I joined Rookout as the first developer, and there I first started working hands-on with Kubernetes. Basically, I was the first developer there. The CTO there loved Kubernetes, and he did some tinkering on non-production environment with Kubernetes. And then they brought me basically to start writing things and to make some order in everything. So I went from zero Kubernetes knowledge into a very passionate person around Kubernetes, mainly because it was 10x better. Yeah.
roughly what year is this? Sorry, just to interrupt.
7 years ago, I think. Kubernetes, I think, was like 3 years old, maybe 4. Helm was this new, very cool beta project, I think, that people were starting to talk about. And I remember that back then when, we didn't use Helm, like no one used Helm. And I was in a CNCF, like a meetup, where a very talented person who was like a Kubernetes enthusiastic to this day showcased Helm. And he was like, this is a very cool thing. You should use it. It really helps you to simplify your life. And the problem for me with Helm, the reason that I didn't use it like when I joined Rookout, is I couldn't comprehend what is Helm. It's like it's such a weird tool that I couldn't understand why and how I should use it. Because for everyone here who is like less techy maybe, or not that like a Kubernetes expert, I will say Kubernetes helps you to run application containers at scale. The problem, or one of the problems with Kubernetes, is that in order to deploy a full production application, you usually need a lot of different pieces. You want a load balancer, you want some SSL, you want some secrets, you want some configuration. And Helm was created to wrap all of this into one logical unit. So you can think about it in a way like in Python, you have PyPy, where you are able to do like a wheel, or in JavaScript, you have the package.json that creates, I don't know, I think like it's packages, like Node.js packages. So Helm, in a way, is very similar to those tools. It basically allows you to wrap everything into one artifact. The problem, I will say, and the reason I was it was not easy for me to use Helm, is because on one hand, it's a package manager. On the other side, it's also a template engine. And on the third side, it is also running or like deploying your application to production. So it has 3 different use cases that doesn't really make sense. But in turn, it provides a very powerful extension or like capability to Kubernetes. And I will say Helm, and this meetup in particular, really made me be even more interested, not only around the technicalities of Kubernetes, but also the ecosystem and the meetups and the community and like contributing and so on. So it was like an enlightening experience.
Very, very cool that you're at the start of that journey as well. I mean, if you're in the first year or so of Kubernetes and people talking about it, it's and for those who don't know, it's basically what runs the internet these days. It's what runs Google, and every single organization wants to migrate there. If you're not on the journey to migrating there, you probably need to, unless you're doing something that is non-standard. It's like it's just the operating system. So it's pretty cool that you were at the start of that journey. As you were at the start of that journey, you must have seen a lot of pitfalls that organizations could possibly avoid. What can you share from that?
Yeah. So I will say we talked about like when I started Kubernetes 7 years ago. 4 years ago, I left Rookout and I co-founded together with Ben Ofiri, who worked at Google, Komodor. And our mission was to simplify Kubernetes, to take this very complex beast and to simplify it for our users. And our users are organization that uses Kubernetes and struggle with it, which is basically all of the different organizations in the world. And we do allow our users management layer, if you will, around Kubernetes that simplify Kubernetes. And we do it both for the platform engineers, the DevOps, the CloudOps, the people who runs the Kubernetes cluster. And on the other side, also for the people who run application that is running on top of Kubernetes, which are the developers. And the reason that we started the company, me and Ben, is because 4 years ago, I already started to feel that on one hand, Kubernetes is gaining like a lot of popularity. I thought it's like one of the best pieces of technology I ever worked with, and I assumed it's going to take over the world. But on the other side, everywhere I went, I saw people that are failing to migrate to Kubernetes. Like I worked at Rookout, which was also like a very cool startup, helping developers to troubleshoot their code. They were acquired by Dynatrace a year ago or a year and a half ago. And because we sold a product that was for engineers and for DevOps, allowing them to troubleshoot code faster, I did a lot of sales calls, or like sales engineering or solution engineer, if you will, when I was at Rookout. And everywhere I go, people were like, yeah, we heard about Kubernetes. We fear it. We don't really want to do the migration right now because it will take us years and we will probably fail. And that like trigger for me, like a sense of something interesting that is happening. And when we founded Komodor, like the first thing that you do, at least in Israel, is you raise money, right? Like you have like a very cool idea and you are like, yeah, I want to raise money. And we went to a bunch of VCs, and some of them told us, no, like Kubernetes is too small. Like no one is going to use it. It's like a hipster technology. Yeah. And like I couldn't argue. Like you see it in front of an investor who is quite smart and he's really good at finance and investment, and he's telling me that's not going to take off. And I'm like, no, like dude, Kubernetes has already won the battle. Now it's only a question of time. Like I will say it is hard for big organization to migrate to Kubernetes. It's not something that you do in a couple of months or even a couple of years if you are big. But back then I felt that the fight was already won by Kubernetes, and now it's only a question of time until it is becoming really popular. And I will say, like, if we'll fast forward 4 years to now, to your remark, I don't think Kubernetes is really the thing that is running the internet just yet. I think that most companies, if you look at the big, like, monster behemoths of the world, they're looking at Kubernetes as this thing that they need to migrate to on one hand, but they don't really know how to do it on the other hand. Most of them already tried for 1 or 2 times and failed. And now they are just trying to understand how are we going to do it. Like some of Komodor customers have a 10-year-old plan on how do they migrate all of their legacy application to Kubernetes. And we see the struggle here for most enterprises around Kubernetes is their application weren't even built for like the Docker or microservice architecture. And they are basically forced to do 2 migration at once, like from monolith into microservices and from their usually on-prem and bare metal machines into like a cloud, maybe Kubernetes. So I do think it's tricky for big organizations to do this migration. On the other hand, I think that organizations that are finishing this migration are gaining a huge boost in their productivity and their scalability. So, it's like you win some, you lose some.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that, and held technical positions before where I've seen people trying to move those monolithic applications and just hoping to wrap them and put them in a container. And it's like, guys, that's not what a container's for. Your container shouldn't need 12 gigabytes of RAM to store your entire product catalog of images or something. It's total failure.
It's I will say like 12 giga is even low. Like we have a couple of customers with around like 100 gigabytes of RAM for their like one container application.
Microservice, yeah.
Yeah, like. I'm not sure if people can see your air quotes here in the podcast, but sure, I think that I will say it's not the worst thing. I hate being like a purist, and I think we have some customers of ours where those guys are really good at making money, right? Like that. This is like some of the software companies. For example, if you look at gambling or casino or things like that, those guys know how to make money. They are not necessarily like a Kubernetes experts, right? It's not their forte. And for them, some of them at least, have a huge monolithic application, like 100 gigabytes of RAM running on old Windows Server. But they do want this standardization. And I will say Kubernetes, one of the very cool thing about it is that it is not that opinionated. Like if you want to take your old legacy application, put it in a container and run it on top of Kubernetes, it is possible. And for like organizations that have some mileage and have applications that are like 10, 15 years old, sometimes it's better to do that, even if just to start this migration process. I will say, if you look at Lambda as an example or like as an alternative to Kubernetes, it's impossible to take your monolithic Windows Server application that requires 1 gigabyte of RAM and move it to Lambda. Kubernetes, on the other hand, it's like, yeah, it's weird. It won't work as you expect, but you can make it work. And that in turns allow organization from all different like sizes to migrate to Kubernetes, even if, again, like it's not the trivial thing to have like those huge monolithic applications.
I think it's in that respect. I hadn't thought of it like that actually, but it's a nice way to put a pause on your problems. Going back many years, it reminds me a little bit. I was in lived in a time where physical data centers and there was the invention of VMware and everybody was virtualizing things. And there were these old machines like Windows 2000 machines and you didn't want to touch them because they could explode. Literally, you know, they were hanging on for dear life and you could turn them into a VM and it just gave you a few more years while they were a VM just so you could fix the problems or migrate out of that. And maybe that's the process with some of these guys where they're moving to a new platform. And they get the benefits of Kubernetes and they're parking some of their problems.
I will say they're not getting a lot of Kubernetes, but at least they are getting one standard way of deploying application. And that in turn really reduce the burden for like the platform and the DevOps and so on. So yeah, I think like it's very similar, like for what you are describing. Like back then, I think I was in high school, so I don't really remember the migration to VMware, but it sounds quite similar.
I'm getting old. What can I say? I also want to touch on something which is you mentioned like you're on the cutting edge, or you were on the cutting edge of Kubernetes when that was coming around, and talking about technologies like Helm before anybody knew what that was, and now that's, you know, the most popular way to deploy. Is there something or rather, I know about certain technologies that become very popular that are really well known, and particularly out of Israel, but people don't know globally. And I would say examples of that are like ClickHouse, for example, and building things on eBPF technology, which still seems more unknown to people in Europe, I would say. Is there something at the moment that is particularly hot, or a trend that you see that is going to be coming in the coming years?
You know, like I'm forced to say like the obvious answer, I think, which is like Gen AI, right? Like everyone is trying to understand how should they use it, and so on. In Komodor, I'll be honest here that when we started the company, AIOps was a bad term to use. Like I feel that it was overloaded with companies that promise developers like, I'm going to solve your problems with AI, and like they over promised and under delivered. So we started the company. We told everyone we are not an AIOps company because we don't do AI. We do a lot of rule base. We have a lot of Kubernetes expertise in-house, and we don't want or believe in AI. And if we look at the current state, I will say that I see changes both in the industry and internal, like for us. So on one hand, we see our customer asking us, hey, are you guys using Gen AI anywhere? And not as a bad thing. They're asking like, we want also to be on the bleeding edge of technology. It's so cool if you are using Gen AI, if you can explain or to show us. So we see like a very big change in how people perceive AI in the ops or in the developer ecosystem. On the other side, I will say AI is really good, or it's not that bad. And using models like a Claude Tree and obviously like a ChatGPT and OpenAI, I see a lot of potential there. I think that all of the big companies are trying to understand how can they harness the power of AI for their usage. So far, I think most companies are quite failing at like doing this adoption of Gen AI, but at least for Komodor, or at least what I think in the industry, I think like this is going to be a very big revolution. But a bit like Kubernetes, I think it will become really mainstream, like in use in a couple of years, not right now. Even in Komodor, we did started like a very interesting project that I can elaborate on.
Yeah, please do elaborate. I see. I see. Like, you know, I think it's a very exciting topic. People talking about it endlessly, but I actually see the productization of AI is actually how most industries or most companies are going to get into it. I don't think every company needs to build their own AI. That's a myth. Same problem with big data a few years ago. But the productization of that is interesting. So
I think like you hit it. You hit the right point. Like you have AI. Let's say you write like ChatGPT or Claude 3.5 like in your fingerprint. What do you do now? How do you use it? And if you look at Komodor, our mission in life is to simplify Kubernetes. We help you to troubleshoot it. We help you to make sure everything is configured. We allow you to know that there are issues before they really happen. Like we have a lot of different capabilities in the product. And the first question was, where should we put or sprinkle this AI on top of so it will be the most beneficial? And we did a lot of POCing and we tried. And I will say that companies that are trying to add a generic AI into their product usually fail. Like if you say, I have a bot that helps you to do everything inside the product, it is usually a shitty bot. Like, sorry, but I think most of the AI generic solutions right now are quite bad. You can look at AWS Q and Datadog, I think Davis or like Dynatrace Davis. Datadog has another AI agent. Google with Gemini also have something around troubleshooting. All of those agents, the things that they have in common is that they can help you, allegedly, they can help you with everything. And in reality, they don't help you with nothing because they don't really provide any additional value. So in Komodor, we try to understand what is the place that we're currently lacking maybe, or we can improve on one hand, but also that Gen AI will provide us with a lot of value, basically. And we ended up around like helping users to investigate certain issues or problems in Kubernetes that we currently didn't develop. Like I told you, we have a very, very what we call brain inside the product that has a lot of rule base and a lot of our own expertise. But there are, Kubernetes has a very long tail. So we said, let's use the Gen AI in order to help our users to investigate issues in Kubernetes faster on the areas that we didn't develop any code so far. And that's what we basically started. And we started using ChatGPT. It wasn't that good. Like we used Model 4. The results weren't that amazing. And then we moved to Claude by Anthropic using AWS Bedrock. And I will say, first of all, like AWS is not paying me anything. I pay them, but it's a good product. Like it really works. Unlike most AI product that I tried during like this POC phases, I think Bedrock really delivers on the promise of AWS Bedrock is wrapping existing models and gives you a very simple interface to use. And it really works, and it allows you to use models without tinkering too much in the plumbing area of that. And now we have our own like model or agent called Claudia, which is basically an agent that is designed to help you to solve issues in Kubernetes faster. And the results are quite like outstanding or much better than we expected. Like 6 months, a year ago when we started this journey, I think that on one hand, the models are keep on improving. Like from Claude 3 to Claude 3.5, there was a huge jump for us. Like we didn't do anything. We just wake up one day, we changed the model that is like we're using behind the scenes, and we got like 50% more precision for the same cost and lower latency. It's like, where else you can achieve something like that? And we're now like this week, like this podcast in the 22 of July, like we are now opening it up for like selected customers, our ability to help them solve issues using Gen AI. And from what we're already seeing from the early result, like it's like our goal was to replicate an amazing DevOps engineer that is sitting on top, like that is sitting right next to you and is helping you to solve specific issues in Kubernetes. And so far what we're seeing is that we are able to even like a bit like over deliver on that promise, because there are times that I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow, like how did he know that? And then I'm doing a lot of Google searches just to make sure that he didn't lie to me, right? Because that's always like the challenging part around using Gen AI. And I'm finding like a obscure issue in, I don't know, like in Istio, for example, that complained about the exact same problem our customer had. And he knew that because, I don't know, like they're indexing all of the internet. And he was able to find a relevant like piece of information. So far we're very excited. I think the industry as a whole are now rushing into Gen AI. It means that like 80 or 90% of what we're seeing is not that good, and it's not going to be here a year or 2 years from now because everyone are just trying to hang on Gen AI. But I think like in a couple of years, we will see a lot of very interesting production application on top of or using Gen AI.
Yeah, that is very cool. I like the tagline that it's like having the DevOps guy sitting next to you, and you've over delivered on that. You know, it's what an awesome thing. I'm genuinely excited about it. I think the bit that when we just totally trust it. So you talked about having to Google search and just test the answers weren't hallucinations. It feels like we're so close to just the answers are getting so good, and we'll get to the point where they're so consistently good. We'll just go do the recommendations, and then I think it gets super interesting because actually developers are just free to code interesting stuff.
I'm waiting forward to that. Like one of the things that our bot is doing is giving a recommendation, and you know, like we are doing a lot of different things to make sure that it doesn't lie. But once every, I don't know, like hundreds of sessions, we're like, why did you give this recommendation? Doesn't make any sense. You are so good so far, and that's one of the challenging things around like the using pre-trained models is that I'm not going to train like Claude. Like I'm not going to do it. Like I think he's quite good, and I don't think in Komodor I have any advantage currently on training my own models. I will say what I do have, and like no one else in the industry almost have, is I have like thousands of existing issues that happen for my customers in anonymous ways and so on, that I know the problem, I know that Komodor detected it, and I know it was solved. And having this database allow me to have better prompt engineering, better RAG, which is basically like allowing the agent to fetch data independently without us coding it. So we see a lot of very interesting things on one hand, but on the other hand, we do I think that it's still young. Let's say that if in my vision we have like dozens of different AI use cases in Komodor, and we are currently focusing on one at least until the end of the queue, and it also took a lot of time to perfect, mainly to a state where we can trust it, where we can say to the customers, hey, we know it's not perfect, but it's 10x better than anything you have, and it's going to change your life. And it took us quite a lot of time to get there.
Would be interesting to know. You mentioned that you tried a lot of those technologies, and Amazon Bedrock worked quite nice, and you mentioned Claude, but is there, and it might just be because it was your use case, but any particular models that were completely useless, or you would...
I will say our use case is super hard, right? Like debugging or like trying to do root cause analysis for Kubernetes issues is like a very, very challenging task to do. So even using a model like Llama 3 or Llama, I'm not sure what's the number, by Facebook, like I gave him the same task and he froze and died. So, you know, that's like one example. Or I'll give another example. One of the things that we ask our model to do is to return all of the answers in a very structured JSON format, so we can utilize it and so on. So one of the problems that we have is that the model takes time to think, right? Like it takes 6 seconds to think, and we ask him different questions. So it can take up quite a lot of time. So like Anthropic has another model named Haiku that is supposed to be like the fast model that is like 10% in the time. So I said, let's give it a try, right? Like, let's test it. It's only like change one string. And this model didn't even return me like a JSON format. Like it only returned me YAML format. Even I asked him, give me a JSON format with those 3 fields every time you answer me. And it failed to deliver on that as well. So I think that, you know, like we are not really where we want to be. But I will say, like, I think Llama 3, I did play with it with like simple use cases. It was fine. I think that if you are going to a very complex scenario, you need the smartest model with a lot of tokens, with a lot of history, like any other model. ChatGPT was not that bad, by the way. Like it's also a good model. But other than those two, like I don't see any model that is even close to help us. And again, most of them lied, which is the worst thing that you can do.
Yeah. It makes me so happy that a CTO of a highly technical company cannot get the AI to respond in a JSON format, because many people will hear that, and because I struggle with these things, I'm like, only ever give me this answer, and it somehow falls over. But yeah, that's all right. Give it 6-12 months. I'm sure the next models of all of these will come out. At this point in the episode, we usually like to ask the DeLorean question, which is the time travel question. And if you go back in time before you started this role, what would be the 3 pieces of advice you would give yourself?
Yeah, I think that the main piece of advice, I think, is hire very strong people right off the bat. I think like that was one of the things that it took us time to understand. Like we hired good people, like all of the people who are in Komodor, luckily for me, are talented. But I think we were lacking certain level of experience. Like both me and my co-founder, this is our first company that we founded together. And I think making sure that we have a very strong management team that help us, like we have right now, is a huge benefit. And I think that maybe it took us some time. Like, when you start the company, sometimes you are like, yeah, I know a lot of things. I can do it by myself or whatever. And I think that was the main thing that I would change back then. Other than that, I'm not sure. I think like this encapsulates so many different mistakes that we have taken along the way, that I don't know like if I have another 2. Even there are a lot of things that I would do differently. But all in all, it is important to say that like 4 years from founding the company, we are at a stage that we raised like $67 million or something like that from like the top VCs in the world, where we have customers that are Fortune 10, and we are seeing more and more usage both on Kubernetes and on Komodor every day that passes. So all in all, I feel that we are in a good state. I think choosing the right partner is, I'm lucky to have been with me on this journey. But I think that like it's one of the things that is so crucial. Like everyone told me that, but until you really experience that both in the high and lows of, starting a company, I think like it's something very critical.
I completely agree with you. We're getting to the close, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to discuss your name. And I assumed it was French, Itiel, but it's not French. Can you just give us the origin of your name?
Yeah, sure, I will. And like for the people here who are not from Israel, like Itiel is like God is with me. Et is like with me, and El is like God. And when I was still not newborn, like inside my mother, basically, she was sick, right? And when I was born, she was very happy because everything went fine. And then she said, like, God is with you, and this is the origin of the name. The problem is in Israel, Itiel is very uncommon name, very, very uncommon. It is a bit common in like the Orthodox Jewish in Israel, but I'm not from there. So like whenever I grew up, like no one was named Itiel. And for everyone here who is like done some software in his life, like Itiel is very common pattern or a term in like computer science, right? Extract, transform, load. And I didn't knew that because I didn't came from like a computer science background. And when I started my first job at eBay, we had a whole division, a whole floor in the company in eBay that is doing ETL. And it was super confusing because for me, every time someone is saying ETL, I'm always like turning to see who calls for me.
Great.
And back then it's like, all of the time, people are like, ETL is failing, ETL is not running correctly, this ETL is bad. No, like you're laughing now, but it was very, someone that is not like used to hearing his name, it's super, super weird because every time someone is saying ETL, I'm sure that I'm the only ETL that, that exists basically. So I'm sure that he's targeting me. So for me, it was like a very hard experience. And if you want like another like short story about the name, when I was at Rookout, we tried to sell the product and we went to the Aluma offices. Aluma was another Israeli startup that was acquired later on by Google, and they done ETL, like smart ETL platform. And I think I met the CEO there, and he's like, "Your name is ETL? I can't believe it. It's like a match made in heaven. I want to offer you a job. We're looking for like a backend engineers here. Do you know backend?" And I was, "Sure, yeah, I do know, but I'm quite happy where I am currently, so
Right.
I'm not looking to leave." And he was like, "If you are going to leave, give me a call and we can sort this out." Maybe it was the CTO, I'm not sure. But
brilliant.
yeah, like the name was really helpful in all kind of things.
I love it. Hey, doesn't matter that maybe you couldn't even do the job. Didn't need to know, but your name was ETL. Yeah, in you come.
He was so happy with the name. He was so excited. Then I really feel that he thought it's like a match made in heaven. It's like a sign that I should be there.
It was a biblical moment or something.
Yeah.
Totally amazing. Itiel, it's been a real pleasure chatting to you. Thank you so much for your insights. Super clever guy. You're very young for an unbelievably successful guy at this point in your life. So hats off to you for that. Any last words before we leave?
No, pleasure being here. Thank you, Ganesh, and thank Tomer here for setting everything up. Pleasure.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. This episode was produced and edited by Daniel Ohana and Tomer Morvidson. Sound editing and mixed by Bren Russell. I'm Ganesh the Awesome, and if you're ready to deep dive and start transforming the way you approach cloud practices and cybersecurity strategies, then the team and myself at Global Dots are at your disposal. We are cloud innovation hunters, and we search the globe looking for the future tech solutions so we can bring them to you. We've been doing it for over 20 years. It's what we do, and if I don't say so myself, we do it pretty well. So have a word with the experts, don't be shy, and remember that conversations are always for free.